at the end of the day, you don't have to be a dirtbag to be a financial advisor. Like, you can make a very good living taking care of people, demystifying this. A lot of this stuff, brilliant people in other industries just don't quite grasp it, but you don't have to take advantage of it.
Hello and welcome to Un Eff Your Finances podcast with your host, Nick St. George. I'm your podcast producer, RJ Malik, and joining me right now, Nick, how are you?
Just another day in paradise. Excited to kick this off.
Excellent. It's nice to meet you, and let's get started. This podcast is a get to know you podcast. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background, where you're from, schooling, where you grew up, all that good stuff.
The back of the baseball card, if you will.
Yes.
Perfect. So I grew up in that little speck on the map, Lincoln, Rhode Island. Went to school at Bryant in finance. So kind of grew up in like a little 20-minute window, if you will. Rhode Island's a small state. If you drive more than 30, 40 minutes, you have to like pack a lunch. They just expect you to be, everything's closer. But I really got the stock market bug. Like 5th, 6th grade, we started doing a stock market game and end up picking a couple winners, right? You got EA Sports because I liked Madden back then.
Right.
Hasbro because you're in Rhode Island and like the G.I. Joes and all that stuff is right there. I think Nike, and it just so happened I won, right? And then suddenly you're hooked. And then my grandparents gifted me like a share of like Disney, a share of Staples, and you just start like following it, right?
Sure,
like,
sure.
This is interesting. It's still trading in fractions. Like, it just kind of blows your mind of like how far we've come down to like the 4 or 5 decimal places on some of these things versus the fractions. But I actually growing up, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I really did. And I was more leaning towards chemistry, biology, something along those lines. Lo and behold, I'm not really a big fan of blood, so that didn't work very well.
Yeah, that could be an issue. Yeah.
And yeah, that just doesn't really bode well. Shockingly don't like needles, hence no tattoos. But go to Bryant, it's down the street. Like, it's kind of, let's see how this whole finance thing is. And it's just a different beast from kind of what you're growing up on. And I don't know, I hope at some point when my kids get to high school, they start teaching basic finance. And a lot of basic finance wasn't really taught. Like, even though being a finance major and everything else like that, like maybe just call it adulting 101. I really wish we kind of have something like how to balance a checkbook, what is mortgage, credit card interest, some of those different things. What are taxes? Like, you just get there, and even with a finance degree, like that's not really covered. Like, it's, hey, like what's amortization rate? And you get all these like stuff that's all right. And especially nowadays, like there's apps will do it for you. Like, you can Google a calendar, an amortization calculator. Oh, how much interest? Like, but what does that really mean to you? But like, when you get into the finance world, and I was lucky enough that across the street from Bryant is actually Fidelity's one of their campuses. So they actually co-taught a Series 7 prep class. So Series 7 is the license you need to like buy and sell stock. It's kind of the basic one. And as long as you got a B or better, they actually paid for you to sit for the Series 7. And back then, you didn't have to be sponsored. I understand that they've closed the loophole since. Sponsored by like a broker-dealer. Like, hey, I'm with LPL. You'd have to park it there. But back then, the state of Rhode Island would let you park your license with them. Like, you didn't have to be part of a member firm. So my last semester was basically a Series 7 prep. So you hear these war stories from these other advisors of like, oh, I was going to get fired if I didn't pass it in 3 weeks. Like,
Right.
Like, it's my job is on the line versus like, this is my like last semester of college, studying in the library to all hours of the night. And you get into it, right? Hey, I'm a license. You suddenly think you're like, should have like the big mahogany desk, and it's like what they think finance and investing is versus what it is. But so I ended up working up there. It was actually Bank of America Investments. Back with that, they would have bank with a C to differentiate the two between the bank, like you go get your checkbook at, versus bank investments. And I got lucky enough to kind of take a promotion down to Charlotte. Hey, I grew up in a 20-minute bubble, didn't go away for college, no kids, no real responsibilities. Let's try Charlotte, and moved down October 2007. Listened to the Red Sox in the World Series on the drive.
Right.
Leading myself right into moving for finance into the financial crisis. Who would have thought?
Yes.
So great timing there. You're in a city that is banking, East Coast banking capital outside of New York, right? You got New York, San Fran, Chicago, Charlotte. You got back then Wachovia, which is now Wells, and all of it. Like E-Trade had a presence here. They end up closing that down. It's just crazy. And then you kind of run into the Bernie Madoff time, right? So back then, I thought I was going to go down a compliance role. Like I thought, hey, compliance is a big thing. We're going to watch out for the bad guys, right? You have these extra licenses now. I've stacked them up, and let's do compliance. Like let's help people, save them from the financial boogeyman, right? Everyone's talking about Ponzi schemes and everything else like that. So I do compliance, and I quickly realized that I'm on the wrong side of the phone. Like some of the things that come up, like, do I really need to look at your email review? But you get these weird trades that would come in of like the 93-year-old person that magically inherited 800 grand to make the trade suitable. And I'm like, did their parents pass away at 130? Like, where did they find all this extra money? And it's just, you look at it and you're like, what are you doing here? And it just really rang true to, like, at the end of the day, you don't have to be a dirtbag to be a financial advisor. Like you can make a very good living taking care of people, demystifying this. A lot of this stuff, brilliant people in other industries just don't quite grasp it, but you don't have to take advantage of them. Like I joke, like I'm too big to hide, right? If I mess up your money and your net worth, like I can't go jump in a clothing rack at the local Walmart. Like you're going to know it's me, right? There's no hiding from it. But if you take care of people, take care of them the right way, they tell their friends, you grow your business. And I end up becoming an advisor. Like it's, figure I'd take a little step back and pay, but like the greater good for some flexibility. And I thought I had all these initial clients like, oh man, I bet you got all your friends and family and your parents going to be wealthy. And it's just like, I think I've recently looked back at like had like this initial like 30 list. And I think 3 of them, maybe 4 are clients to this day. And then like none of them were like the first ones. So it's an interesting journey. Like it's not really the direct way. I don't know it's for everyone, but like it was interesting to see the self-directed world, see compliance. You kind of work the different parts of the industry to see different perspectives and how it all balances back to you. And at the end of the day, this is, people work really hard for their money. They're always going to tell you their loved ones are number one, but their money's pretty close. And depending on the day, the money might be ahead of the loved ones. So they want to make sure their money works as hard as they do and is taken care of. Like you want to be that easy button for them to, they get enough stuff to stress out. Like you work 40, 50 hours a week, you get a family, other responsibilities. Like you have the brain power to do it, but do you have the time? Do you want at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, sit down and start scouring reports and figuring out, does my Excel spreadsheet have errors? Like remember met with a colleague's client, and he's like, I got to Roth convert. I have to Roth convert. It's the only way to go because it's going to make a $2.5 million difference. And he had his spreadsheet. The guy was an engineer, like very bright. And in the same breath, he's like, yeah, my family doesn't have longevity. We got heart issues. And you look at the spreadsheet. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, your math is right if you live to 126. And I'm like, I have software that will help me. Like, I'm like, you're not, I'm like, it probably is a benefit, but it's not as robust as you think it is. Like, let's look at the numbers. Let me calculate it. Because when you get into it on an Excel spreadsheet and you get the numbers floating around your head of all over the place, like, what is this, right? Like, why should you stress yourself out into oblivion when you already have so many other responsibilities? Like, I know how to change my own oil, but I'm not going underneath my car. Like, there are certain things, outsource it. It's just one of those things. Let there be an expert. I'm not saying I'm smarter than you. I do this. I see enough of it, and let me make it easier. Let me explain it so you understand it. If you understand what you own, why you own it, and what our blueprint or path, like the financial plan part, you can withstand. I don't know. We had a couple weeks ago, we had Chinese carry trade. I don't think anyone knew what a carry trade was until about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not, we're not getting takeout. It's a carry trade. What is, oh, well, how does it matter to me? I'm like, well, in a week's time, it doesn't matter, right? Nobody's asking about that right now. But it's an interesting journey. I don't know if it's for everybody, but it's definitely how we got here. But it's,
Do you think your journey, the way you did your journey, is beneficial for you, in the sense that that's the best way you could have gone about to learn and get you to where you are now?
I wish I made a lot less mistakes.
But don't you learn? Looking back, yes, you say you don't want to. You wish you didn't make as many mistakes, but sometimes don't you learn more from a mistake than a success?
Oh yes, like coaching my kids' teams, like we learn more losing than we do winning, right? When winning and success, it kind of glosses over all faults versus, hey,
Yeah,
is it sometimes a step or two forward, three steps back, and but you got to learn. As long as you learn from it, is it really a mistake? But yes, I tell my kids, like, I'm trying to help them, like, hey, let's maybe do this a little bit differently. Oh, I want to do it my way. I'm like, might have made that mistake before. Like, hey, Bo, I know you're a little bit of a rage monster. I might have had that temper. I might know where you get that from. Like, let's help this along. So as long as you learn from it and try to like do better. But like, if you keep making the same mistake, that's another beast. But yes, it's, if I were to go speak at a college or high school, would I go, this is your blueprint? This is your yellow brick road to being an advisor? Probably not. But I would tell anyone like getting into it, I wouldn't go right into it. Like for instance, if the kids down the road ever want to get into this, they don't get to go from like high school, college right into the business. Like they're going to have to go work somewhere else, learn some different things. Like they struggle to listen to me about how to tie their shoes. I don't know how much they're going to listen to me on like nurturing them in the business. So go works in other parts, maybe some part of finance for a couple years, and cut your teeth, learn some different things, build a network. Maybe that's what you want to do. Like, I don't want to sit there and tell them like, you have to come work for me or else. Like, they got to want it, right? They got to have that passion. They got to want to have the drive. And I think they need to learn from other people before they come into this aspect of it.
it gives them a different perspective, and I can relate to that. When I was graduating from college, my dad told me, and he was at the time, they don't exist anymore, but he was a manufacturer's rep, which basically represented factories to different stores. He was in the hardware industry, so he represented factories to go to local hardware stores. I grew up on Long Island; that's where he worked, and so that's how it worked out. But when I was graduating college, he told me there's no way he was going to hire me. Listening to you, I felt like I had a flashback. And he said, exactly what you said. You got to get experience. And as it turned out, I didn't even go anywhere near what he was doing. I got into radio. And unfortunately, it was a good thing because then Lowe's and Home Depot came along, and it wiped out my dad's position. He fortunately for him, he was ready to retire. But
That's a similar one of my college roommates. Hopefully he sees this. He knows who he is. Like his family owned, I want to say like 15 grocery stores. And in college, we always assumed he's going into the family business. Like there was no way. And I want to say it might have been our senior year or end of our junior year. The family sold the grocery stores, and his dad was like, "Look, the grocery Target and Walmart groceries have my products, same products on the shelf, cheaper than buying wholesaler. So I'd rather get out now." And it's just like, I think his whole life he kind of assumed it's been a family business. Like I want to say his grandfather started it. Like, but sometimes you got to pivot. Like, kudos to his dad and his brothers, like all of them, like seeing the writing on the wall instead of running into the ground where it's worth nothing. They, from my memory, they get a pretty sizable payout. Like it could have been. But you hear some of these other businesses, like, I don't know, go get a Polaroid, right? Oh my, like some of those things. Go look at Blockbuster. You hear those stories that Blockbuster had the option of buying Netflix, and they were like,
oh, wow.
we don't think this is viable. Like sometimes you got to pivot, and even though you thought you were going to do something, life happens.
Change is constantly happening
Oh yeah.
in every industry, and that must also be a factor for you. You've got to watch for a lot of changes constantly to make sure your clients are in the right position for their future.
Oh yeah, and I feel like it was a newsletter last month, or maybe it was when the carry trade happened. I'm like, in your best Kevin Bacon voice, remain calm. Like like my people younger than me may not quite get that, but like a lot of the people I work with, you start looking 35 and up, like they get the Animal House reference, and you kind of look at how old that movie is, makes me feel old. I'm like, oh my god, like it's really been that long, but you got to be aware of what's going on, but you also got to be smart enough to like weather the storm. I got a neighbor, he's a pilot. Actually, him and his wife are pilots. And I remember talking one time about turbulence. And it's just like, hey, you get on a flight and suddenly like you're finding religion as the plane shakes a little bit. And he's like, I'm like, how far? I'm like, is that a couple hundred feet? He's like, yeah, it's like 10 to 20 feet max is the wiggle. And I'm like, he's like, unless like the air like that comes out, he's like 5, 10, 20 feet. Like it's not. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, so that's when your portfolio bounces around like a percent or two.
Okay.
Do you jump out at 30,000 feet? Now it may feel awful. It's a horrible feeling. Nobody wants to see a red number. Like if I can make your account double every month, I would, but it's just not repeatable, realistic, all of it. And yes, I'd like to have a flight with no turbulence and nothing worse than getting de-iced, that sort of thing. But like, it is part of it, right? I had to drive to the beach this weekend for my son's baseball tournament. And it's like, I wish I hit no traffic, but you got to go there, right? Like you're going to hit some bumps in the road. You're going to get, and those bumps in the road might lead you to Buc-ee's. It's worth the stop. And it's just part of it. And you do have to be aware of what's going on, but you can't react to every time. You can't be, I don't know, call it a helicopter parent with the markets. Like if something happens, if we have a bad week, it's all right. You go plant an oak tree in your backyard. You don't dig it up in 45 days and be like, oh, how big are you? Like, give it a little bit of time. But do we need to add a little water? Do we need to water a little less? Like, there are adjustments to be made, but you don't want to do these wholesale all or nothing changes, like this complete panic mode of, oh my God, I got to do this, or nothing worse. Oh, my neighbor did this. Oh, my coworker did this. And I'm like, your coworker also never lost at the casino once, right? Like it's like,
yes.
Anytime they bought a Powerball ticket, they've got at least $50. Like it.
Yeah, I worked with a guy who would go to the casino every day, and every once in a while he'd walk in with a big wad of cash, but it was not often. You know, because when he won, he was like, "Oh, look at this! I won this playing cards at the casino." Blah blah blah, but the thing is, you know, it could go 3 months and he's never came back with a big wad of cash. And I you know, we'll fast forward a little bit. He ended up in jail. I found out after I stopped working with the guy. He did end up going to jail. But you know, you really have to take a big picture view of things, right? I mean, that's something that you really have to watch. But one question I want to ask, because I know this, you know, the person I deal with my wife and my finance, he tells us it's, you know, the stock market going up and down is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. So don't panic. Just we got a goal. Keep your eye on the goal. Is that something that you?
Oh, absolutely. You got to be plan focused. Like, what are we trying to get to? Right? You want to retire at this. You want to retire at 60 with this much money each month, adjusted for inflation. We're going to worry about some of the healthcare. Do we have an insurance need? Look at the big plan. Like, you're not going to look at this. You realistically, in 5 years, you won't remember that one Monday was bad. Now, on Monday, it feels awful, but 5 years ago, like outside of my kids remembering like the best chicken tender was in Pigeon Forge 3.5 years ago, but you're not going to remember the best day in the market, the worst day in the market 2, 3, 4 years from now. Like it's just not part of it, but that's why you stick to the plan. Like I scramble to get over here from a meeting. I'm like, we need to have a plan. How much money I'm like, we're going to figure out how much money do you need, how much time, how much risk will let you sleep at night. We got to turn this into a math problem. Math isn't emotional. Math is that. The numbers are the numbers. But the stock market, yeah, it's irrational. Stock market is absolutely crazy. What we're trying to do is invest in high quality companies with a good balance sheet, positive cash flow. Think of Shark Tank. If you walk in and say, "Hey, I got a hope and a dream that this might work," Mr. Wonderful is going to be like, "Yeah, you're dead to me, no deal." But if you go in there and say, "Hey, our sales are this, our expenses are that, we've got a positive cash flow, we need to expand," they're gonna give you a deal. And sometimes, especially after COVID, you saw some of those like weird investment pools of like, oh, it was like a concept. Like you need sales revenue. You can't just keep racking up debt. And you saw a lot of that, especially when interest rates rise. That hey, we used to be able to borrow money for nothing. All right, whatever. We'll wing it. We can just borrow more. We'll have another round of equity. We'll issue more debt. We'll issue more shares. But eventually that's going to come home to roost. So I'd rather own stuff that profitable businesses. And yes, over time, who would have thought? You asked somebody 30 years ago if Kodak was going anywhere, they'd be like, "What do you mean?"
Right.
Like the world does evolve. That goes back to is you have to be aware. You got to keep up with the times. Like, hey, there was nothing better on a Friday night than Blockbuster and some Pizza Hut. Like now, what's Blockbuster? If I gave my kid a VHS, they're gonna be like,
Yes. Yes.
like you see the picture of like a floppy disk. Oh, how you saved back then? Like they look like,
But you're right. That's a great point. How things change so quickly. So you have to you have to have a worldview of watching different industries and sort of predicting, how well they're going to grow.
correct. It really is, but it goes back to you don't make massive changes. If you're on a cargo ship or a cruise ship, you know roughly where you need to go. Do you kind of, hey, there's a storm, let's veer a little this way, veer a little that way, but you're still headed towards your goal, towards the plan. And the nice thing now with technology and everything else there is like there's ways of getting more concise data. I don't have to sit there and read through an entire earnings report. Like there's ways of getting, I don't know, cliff notes so I can digest it. And here's another thing. Not only do you have to digest it, I got to explain to you what it is. What does that mean? What's this buzzword? What is a carry trade? You hear about some of these other buzzwords that come up. They're like, oh, I read about, what was it? An I bond was a recent one. That was a couple years ago. It's like, oh, why don't we have more of these? I'm like, the cap is 10,000. Like, you get $1 million portfolio. What is 110? I'm like, you got to buy, like, explain the process. Like, you hear these buzzwords and explain to them, to you, the client, the investor. Like, what does it really mean to you? How does that affect your plan? How does that affect your day to day? Does it? Like, do you care? Should you care? But you don't want to just tell somebody, oh, the Sharpe ratio is this and the beta is that. Like that's Greek. Sounds like the teachers in the Peanuts, right? Like it's just
Wah, 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 wah. Yes.
but if I can break it down for them to understand what we own and why we own it, that helps mitigate some of that nonsense. Because investing's difficult. Like you buy a house, you see your house, you go touch the walls. You buy a car, you see the car. You invest, you see it on the app, you get a statement, like that touch and feel isn't there. So it is somewhat tricky. It takes a little bit of a leap of faith of, hey, I'm not putting your money underneath my pool in the backyard, right? Like we're buying companies and we're not just buying a thought or a hope or a dream, and that it's tangible. Hey, we can sell and get you money in a couple of days, right? It's next day settlement now. We can get money to you pretty quickly. But to get past some of that angst of I can't touch and feel it. Oh, you're not getting a stock certificate anymore, right? Like your bond payments are electronic. You don't have a bearer coupon like the old, like way back when. So there's a lot of difference in getting people just to trust the process. I know that kind of sounds a little quirky, but like
Not at all.
you work very hard for your money. You don't want to just take it on a whim. And if it does sound too good to be true, it usually is. Probably 6-7 years ago, there was a pretty big Ponzi scheme here in Charlotte. Like they made it to the HBO did a special talking about it, but this guy was on local news, all this other stuff, and had ads, and basically it was a Ponzi scheme, but it looked cool, right? And It had all the glitz and glamour and and he's on TV. He has to be. If you're on TV, you got to be the real deal, right? And
You're from the New England area. Do you remember Brad Blight?
ooh, the name rings a bell, but not quite.
He was Bernie Madoff before Bernie Madoff in Boston,
Oh wow.
and my wife worked for his company. He owned
Oh
a
wow.
radio station that my wife worked for, and my wife walked in one day. It was a Thanksgiving weekend, and she walked in with the Boston Herald, and on the front page was a picture of, and she goes, "Here's my boss." and it
Oh
was a
wow.
big scandal. He was a financial advisor, and it was a Ponzi scheme, and he lost his mother's money, all his mother's money. He just,
Oh
I
my God.
mean, yeah, he went to jail. I think he went for 10 years. But I know what you're talking about.
Every year you might see it. They call it Bobby Bonilla Day. He deferred like 1,500,000, I think, every year.
Yes,
But if you go back, gets even it's even smarter. The Mets ownership were big with Madoff, and they were basically giving bonuses and
right.
saying we can get in. And
Yes,
Bobby Bonilla said, "No, I'll take deferral." So there was a lot of players' money like, "Hey, that we're going to pay you your salary, but go invest with our guy. Like we'll do you a favor. He has high minimums. We'll let you in."
I forgot about that.
And
Yes.
that's part of why he has it. Like there was a lot of other decisions that went into it, but that whole Bobby Bonilla day, he said, "You know what? Just pay it out to me in installments. Like I'll take it later. I don't need it all right now."
A smart move. I mean, he's been getting, I think, over $1 million over the every year for the last like 25 years.
Oh yeah, and yeah, hey, I could have invested time value, but like you see a lot of these players, like I love that 30 for 30 broke talking about showing all the players
Yes,
that
phenomenal.
because you suddenly have 17 cousins. Like, look, if I hit Powerball, my phone needs to be turned off immediately. Like, I'm going to wipe myself from the internet because I'm going to find like 48 relatives asking for money. And you hear those statistics of like people just, they hit the lottery and then they're broke in 5 years.
Yes. Oh yeah. A lot of them are like that. So it's okay. We're getting a little off topic here, but it very, very, very interesting. I want to get back to you and your business and your specialty. Um, so I guess a simple question, and here's a chance to blow your own horn. What makes you stand out from the competition? Why I'm your client or a potential client? Why should I go with you?
Saying I'm prettier or taller than them is not enough. Like, come on.
Better hair than me?
Yeah. um, it really is. I think it's the hands-on touch, right? Like you can find an investment allocation online. You can Google it. You can find it. Or you can get one of those robo. But to truly dig down, know you as the person, know your relationship with money, how you're raised, was it rich, poor, somewhere in between? How, like, what is important to you? Like a lot of these places will offer, hey, we'll do your financial plan in 12 questions, fill out 3 lines. I'm not one size fits all. Neither is your finance. You work too hard for your money. Now, if you're just starting out of college, and you just want to throw a couple dollars. Hey, I'm setting up my retirement. All right, it's so begin early on. It's fine. And I'm not going to say there isn't a place for that stuff, but you have to have know the tax part of it. You have to know the investment strategy, your risk, like, and have the forward thinking of showing them, hey, here's the baby steps. Like I'm a big guy, always battling weight. The doctor tells you got to lose 100 pounds in a month. You're just like, all right, never mind. But if we say, hey, we're going to make a tweak and adjust your savings each month, like you got to really have that customized plan, that detailed, just your plan. I don't care about your neighbor, your brother-in-law, whoever else it is, and you talk to me. Like it's not like I got a 28 team. There's a couple really good advisors, but they've grown so big that you don't get to meet with them anymore unless you have like 2 commas on your 2, 3 commas. Like you still get to talk to me. It's not like, hey, there's so and so. Like, oh, let me go look through your notes and look through the chart. Like, oh, I guess that you used to work and you start like, no, it's me. Like my clients have seen my kids grow. They've been part of that journey. Like to see someone that retired. Like this happened right around just into COVID. He's like, I always thought this was a crock of shit that your financial plan, but he's like, we followed it. We made those. He's like, and now they moved down to the beach. Like, he's like, all right, we waited for the Social Security. We did this. He's like, when you explained the plan, I just thought you were like this car salesman. He's like, but over time, you see like the math of it. So if you see the math, understand the process, what we own and why we own it, we're covering a lot of it. And I'd say my really secret sauce is the amount of communication. Like, I try to talk to you. You're going to get a weekly newsletter and it's bullet points. Like, I mean, talk to me like I'm a puppy, bullet points, because you don't need to read through it and try to like Google, what does he mean by that? Put out the emails, some videos, calls, just check in. How's your summer going? Right? Like, how the more communication both ways, the easier it is, the less angst you feel. And you get some of those clients that, hey, the market's having a rough day. Let me give them a shout. How are you doing? You all right? You need a hug? Like, it's one of those things, but having the open dialogue, it seems basic. It seems like clean sheets at a hotel, but like, I get some of that feedback. They're like, oh, this is different. Like, you say you're different, but like, I've had other advisors, but like, other advisors call me either to sell me something, or they had to be like, hey, this is your annual check-in. Are you okay? And click. Like, they were done in 90 seconds or less.
Right. But it's still, some of it also is on the client. The client needs to be proactive to a certain extent.
Not viable to call you like weekly and say, hey, how was your weekend? But if something happens, but I was in the car driving down to Myrtle Beach on Friday, client reached out, hey, house is having some issues. I need to take some money out. I'm in the car sitting in traffic on my laptop, got it going, sent the request over to the admin to get the money processed. Like, hey, sorry to hear about the house, but like, that's communication. I probably wasn't going to call you the Friday of Labor Day because I'm hoping you're doing something, right? But I took that call. It's not like, hey, I'm out of office. Like,
Right.
like, take a call. What's all that noise? I'm coaching baseball. What's up?
It sounds like communication and the personal touch is very important to how you conduct your business.
Absolutely.
Okay, very good. All right, we are running out of time. So my last question to you is, how do you want to leave your first podcast and the message you want to send to potential clients and to your clients?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. Now you're going to ramp me up to the hard ones like that, RJ. I'd leave it with, if you feel like you're just a number, if you feel like you don't understand a plan, or heck, some of the time you hear these people that don't have a plan. Like, oh, I invest to make money. I'm like, no, that's an outcome. Like, what are we doing it for? How much money do you need to retire on? Like, how much money do your kids need for college? Oh, you want to have a second home. How are you going to fund that? Like, just hoping for like a family member to like inheritance or a random bonus. Like, you got to have a plan. You got to, and understand what you own. I think if you take, and lastly, turn off the TV. Like, they're selling chaos. They're not selling, like, they're not worried about you. They're worried about selling TV ads and scaring the bejesus out of you. Like, have a plan, understand what you own. And if you pick up your advisor's number and call them and they don't answer, like, what are you paying for?
Got it. Got it. Very good. All right. How can people get in touch with you? How can they find you, Nick?
You got stgeorgewealth.com. Nick at stgeorgewealth.com is the email. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, no carrier pigeons yet. And all the other ones, I'm not there. There's too many hoops to jump through compliance. And I feel as though I'm too old for TikTok and stuff like that.
Okay, that sounds good. Love the subtle New England sense of humor. Always appreciated that.
New England sense of humor. Is that a nice way of saying asshole?
No. I lived on Cape Cod for a couple of years. In fact, my wife and I just got back from vacationing in Cape Cod.
I am a sucker for the apple picking there. You give me one of those apple cider donuts, like,
you're good to go.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Looking forward to your next podcast, and thank you for listening to today's Un Eff Your Finances podcast. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with friends and family. And to our next podcast, for Nick, I'm RJ Malik.
Thank you for listening to the Un Eff Your Finances podcast. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.stgeorgewealth.com or give us a call at 828-481-8836. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of St. George Wealth Management. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC.
Any guests and their company or companies are not affiliated or endorsed by LPL Financial unless otherwise stated. Individual tax and legal matters should be discussed with your tax or legal professional. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of principal.